Today, I am joined by a wonderful friend, somebody I've come to really respect and love and have more in common with than we ever expected to when we started our journey together. Delilah Welch is one of my classmates from my Master of Arts program in Theology and Leadership. We met being Gonzaga students together a few years ago. When we started out, we were both just living our lives, loving our people, and midway through our program, my husband passed away, and my classmates were among my greatest friends during that time, gave me an incredible amount of support, and we became really, really close. And I think part of the reason for that is because we got to experience in real time things we were going to be taking with us from our program. Several of our classmates have become chaplains, and Delilah is a teacher at the Marine Military Academy in Texas. It's an amazing school. She just actually, if you don't mind me mentioning, competed in a national essay with of Marine of not Marine of military schools throughout the U.S. and took first place in the staff division. So, not to mention, the school also took first place in the junior high and high school divisions for this essay, which is really impressive. And she'll share a little bit about that. And I'm going to have her record herself sharing that essay with all of us because it touches on the reason that she and I have come to have so much in common, and that's her own grief at the passing of her beloved sweetheart, Mike. She'll share a little bit about that. So, Delilah, would you start by just introducing yourself?
Thanks for having me on, Julie. Sorry, I didn't know when to pipe in or not.
No, it's good.
Yeah, we really did wind up. I think we had no idea on that first day of our cohort, even though COVID had just started. The world went on lockdown in March, and we started our program in May of 2020. We really had no idea, really, how much we would go through with one another. I mean, not just the two of us, but just, I think everybody in the cohort had something pretty dramatic happen. I think the whole world had something really dramatic happening.
It's true.
But I'm Delilah Welch. Yeah, I'm a teacher in Harlingen, Texas. I am a mother, a single mother. And a single mother of a 19-year-old son who is in college in Michigan, and 3 dogs. I teach English literature, and my mom lives only about 4 or 5 miles away from me, so I'm a full-time daughter as well.
That's so great. So tell me about Mike. How you met, how he came into your life.
Okay, so Mike and I met while we were teaching at a different school, Harlingen South, and he and I actually shared a wall. So, and we did for many years, but I don't know, one day, just because I am who I am, and the way that I am, I just, I knocked shave and a haircut on his wall. So just duck, 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 not knowing who was on the other side, but a thump thump arrived from the other side. And I had this crazy 3rd period class that when we got together, especially on pep rally Fridays, they would get really riled up. And then we heard this other class on the other side get riled up too. And then my class would say, "We've got spirit." "Yes, we do. We've got spirit. How about you?" And then we would hear from the other side. And I mean, after a while, it took a while to settle them down and actually get some work done. But finally, I went over to the other side. I'm like, who the heck is on the other side? And it was I'd get to one room, and it was the social studies hallway. So I'm looking down one room, can't be that person, can't be that person. And then I ran into this woman, Sherry. I'm like, Sherry, is it you? She's like, no, it's Mike's kids. They're always so loud. And I'm like, right, okay. So I popped in. I'm like, Mike, it's you. And Mike and I had known each other because we'd been, teaching for so long, but we hadn't really spent an abundant amount of time together. And so that's kind of how it started out. Honestly, a solid friendship first. But then it developed into more. And when our students found out that the two of us were dating, oh my goodness, like it was kind of funny because in high school, I was never part of the in crowd, but somehow as a teacher, like we were the power couple on campus, and
Oh, that's cute.
it was crazy. And it was really cool because he taught juniors, I taught juniors, he taught AP, I taught AP. So often we had one batch of kids going from one of our classrooms into the other classroom or vice versa.
Oh,
So
that's fun.
he would talk trash about me. I mean, he would
Yeah.
talk smack about me in his class, like, hey, did you guys hear that ambulance go by? Somebody should check and see if Ms. Welch is cooking. And like, they would come back, Miss, you really cook that? Have you really killed people with your cooking? I'm like, no, I am a good cook. I just don't do it often. But just, no,
But he was just fun and liked to tease, huh?
he was fun. He loved to tease. And honestly, I loved receiving it. I loved that kind of attention. And, we just tossed it back and forth. He was very sarcastic, but so am I. So we matched each other well. And, oh God, he was so generous. One thing that really surprised a lot of people at his wake was I decided in my talk to just reveal a lot of what I knew about him that not many people did. So there were little things like, many people didn't know that he had seen every episode of the Gilmore Girls. But and that in college, he actually changed his schedule in college around so that he could watch Days of Our Lives. But
No way.
yeah. And he's like,
No
and I've
way.
never seen Days of Our Lives. And he's like, Delilah, you don't understand. When Marlena died, it was one of the worst days of my life. I'm like, what? I don't even know what to do. And
That's
he's
so
like,
funny.
okay. So
Because you don't necessarily think of this manly man watching Days of Our Lives, on the edge of
right.
his seat.
And he was a manly man. That's the thing. Like, but he was so compassionate, so generous. One of the things I revealed to people was that our school, and every 7 years they had a textbook adoption, and one year they purchased a number of AP textbooks, but they didn't buy as many as the program grew after they purchased them, so they didn't have enough textbooks to put in every child's hand. So Mike went online and he purchased used textbooks from all sorts of different places online because he believed every child needed a book in their hands. And so there was, at the end of the year, students would either have to return their books to the library if it was a school book, or to him because he had about 30 textbooks that he had purchased. Now, each one of these ran $70 to $100.
Oh my gosh. That's incredible.
When the AP test came, or when it came time to register for the AP test and pay for it, he would have students who would say, yeah, I would take the test, but my family can't afford it right now. They can't afford the fee. And he'd be like, I got you. Yeah, but I don't know when I can pay you back. Whatever, I got you. And he would reveal to me that sometimes he wasn't entirely too confident if they would do that well on the test, but he believed everybody should be able to have an opportunity if they want to take that test. And just so many different examples of selfless generosity and love. And it it's very strange but beautiful being in a relationship with someone who you respect and admire. Now, granted, there are plenty of times where, I might be like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. I would think he had a bad idea, but always admired him, always looked up to him. And I know he had that same respect for me. And yeah, it's good to know that a relationship like that can exist.
Yeah. Yeah. And you found him later in life.
I did.
Kind of like I finally found that
Yeah,
one.
finally found the one. Obviously, I have a son who
Mhm.
is from a previous relationship that was where I got a divorce and a Catholic annulment. And
Delilah, could you explain a little bit about that process? Because you and Mike were engaged to be married. So could you
yes.
maybe walk through that, especially for people who are not Catholic, they don't know all the nuances of that.
Okay. So in the Catholic Church, or not in the Catholic Church, just that there's divorce.
Right.
However, when a person legally divorces another person, that's a legal definition. However, the church believes that marriage is a covenant. So while a
Right.
divorce may dissolve the legal aspect of it, a covenant with another human being and with God cannot just be dissolved by going
Right.
into a courtroom.
Right.
So an annulment is actually an investigation into, and there's a tribunal and everything, but it's a very intense investigation that takes place sometimes over, I've heard of some that went longer than 10 years.
Wow.
um, but it's an investigation to see whether the necessary elements for a covenant were present at the beginning. Were those elements present? Were they present? Thereby justifying an actual or defining an actual covenant or covenanted marriage. So, my marriage dissolved, and then eventually I started dating Mike. And I knew right off the bat that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with this man. But I had gone from my mother's house to my husband's house, or rather my ex-husband's house, and never really lived under my own roof, under my own steam power.
Mhm.
And I wanted to, no, I don't know about test myself, but I wanted to prove my abilities,
Right.
And and Mike understood that. Not only that, but while I knew I wanted to be in a relationship with him forever, you still want to you want to go through the courting steps, if you will.
Right.
And not only that, but I had a son. So,
Yes, and this
Joaquin
would
needed
affect him a
to,
lot.
yes. So wanted Joaquin to adjust to this individual, even though Joaquin had known him prior as a friend of the family. So where was I?
Well, you and Mike made a choice
Ah,
to get
yes.
married after Joaquin had graduated high school,
Yes.
right? Which
So
makes a lot of sense to me.
in 2020, the chaos that's there. And I think you'll remember this. I actually was putting up, Mike and I were putting lights up on my house, but Mike was afraid of heights. So I was up on a ladder and I did a dumb thing on the ladder. And I slipped and I fell on my face onto concrete. And I was out for about 10 minutes and I broke my face. And Mike chose 7 days after that day to propose to me. Uh, and with my black eye and everything, but evidently he had purchased the ring in November.
Oh my.
And
You've been waiting for the perfect moment.
yeah, he'd been waiting. So he waited till I broke my face. No, and he said, he joked. I mean, he didn't really think this, but he was just like, yeah, there you were, unconscious on the ground. And I was thinking, geez, I don't know if they'll take the ring back. And yeah. But he proposed, and we decided to, even though we'd already been dating, 8 years by that point, we decided, okay, we're going to wait 2 more years when my son graduates high school, because that will be a good natural time to make big changes, big shifts, big changes. And so even though I had received my annulment from the Catholic Church already by that point, I still had to meet with the church when I became interested in getting married again. I had to meet with officials from the church to be sure, they wanted to make sure, okay, do you know what a covenanted marriage is this time?
Right.
And then after that, they met with Mike. Do you understand what it is to have a covenanted marriage? And so we had those meetings, and we had received our stamp of approval from the diocese.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 weeks later, he was dead. Yeah. And I know
the timing of that seems especially cruel.
Yeah. And, it was a sudden death. Yeah, it wasn't one of these deaths that you can quote unquote prepare for.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really did come out of left field. There was, I mean, I don't know if there's any preparing for it. There's getting your ducks in a row, I suppose, getting paperwork in order, preparing the details of it, but emotionally, I don't know if there is any preparation.
No. And you had no reason at all in the world to think that you were about to be plunged into the worst experience of your life right after you had that we are good, green light, we are getting married, this is going to happen.
No, I had no idea. In fact, I really didn't I didn't think death was in the cards until about 2 hours before his death.
Right.
And 2 hours before his death, he was he had been in the hospital for a few days, but I thought, oh, it's, he's just got like a little infection. We're going to work on this infection. I had no idea. And so it wasn't until they asked me for permission to intubate him that I suddenly realized, oh, this is serious. And I don't think they knew either. I don't think the hospital knew he was going to take such a dramatic turn until those last hours.
So this is ironic because up until that moment, I mean, you'd been together for several years. Everyone knew you as a couple. Everyone knew your next step was, the legal marriage, right? You're in the hospital making major life and death decisions. And yet, because you hadn't officially been married, things took a turn after he passed away with people who probably should have known better as to how they treated you.
Yeah. I have to say, his nephews and his ex-sister-in-law, they were and have been absolutely wonderful with me. In fact, one of them sent me for Christmas, sent me a bracelet, and on the bracelet in Morse code, it says "badass aunt" on it, and I absolutely love that bracelet. And so, but because Mike didn't have a will, uh, all of his, everything from his house to his bank account to his car, they all went to his father, who is still alive, and his mother, who was alive at the time, but she passed a month after Mike did. But because his father is elderly, his brother has taken over all the affair, all of his life's affairs. And I I certainly wasn't in a relationship with Mike for the money.
Right.
I'm a teacher. Money isn't really what I'm in, obviously isn't what I'm about to begin with.
Well, and
But
obviously for Mike too, right? If he was taking a significant portion of his salary to make sure that kids had books and the opportunity to take the AP exam, he had a servant's heart. You both have servant's hearts.
yeah, we do. And he did, I do. I think it's part of why we just clicked so well together. But that eventually Mike's house was sold, and from what I understand, his vehicle's just sitting in an empty lot right now. And I certainly never wanted to get rich off Mike's death. However, I had hoped, since my son is going to a private school in Michigan, uh, some of the proceeds there from the house, if it had been split 4 ways between his 3 nephews and my son, could have really helped with his schooling. But yeah, it I do think sometimes death and funerals and these end of life events, they bring out some of the ugliest aspects of humanity. And so when it came time to decide whether I would buckle down and fight, I decided not to.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just because that's not what Mike was about.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are a number of things he would have wanted me to have. I know that. But I also know that he was personally disgusted by the way humanity changes itself for a cash grab.
Right.
And so I let it go. And I don't mean to make myself out to be like, oh, look at me, I let it go. No,
No, I know it was really excruciating because he'd been in his home, you'd been in his life,
yeah,
a relative who, by chance of birth and didn't have the same relationship or even a close
no,
relationship with the, making all those decisions.
yeah. And that individual actually threw me out of Mike's house um, at one point, rather rudely, to put it lightly, rudely. Um, and I was afraid I wouldn't have a chance to just say my goodbyes to that particular space where we actually had our first kiss.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and where he actually I'm sitting in the chair right now. I'm sitting in the chair that he sat in right before he proposed to me. And right next to me, disassembled though, right next to me is the chair I was sitting in when he proposed to me.
Oh, wow.
Uh, so I was able to, because of the nephews, they let me get the chairs.
I'm
And
so
it's
glad.
one of
Yeah.
those things, like, just it,
Yeah. It just feels comforting, right? You're sitting
it
in
does.
this. I can relate to this a little bit because my husband, when he passed away, was a was a partner in a medical practice, and one of the partners in particular just took such a bizarre approach to everything that had to do with the legalities of dissolving that relationship, right? And um, I feel he had only been gone a few weeks, and we got a letter in the mail, like a legal letter in the mail, detailing the aspects of our separation from the practice. Not that it wasn't obvious he was gone, right? But
Mhm.
one of the line items was that our family would no longer qualify for discounted skincare products or procedures. Can you even fathom putting something so petty in the letter to someone who just lost their husband and father?
Yeah.
The person I would literally turn to in bed and say, hey, what cream should I put on this? It itches.
Hmm.
To think that, it'd be, well, certainly don't expect to come here and get any kind of break.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know,
Well, and somebody who had been his partner. I mean, in
yes,
another respect, uh,
yes.
you would think that they would have some sort of, I don't know, sensitivity to his life's partner. But
But like you said, the death and funerals, and when money's involved, it can bring out the absolute ugliest aspect of people. And I remember talking to my brother about this because it was so upsetting. It wasn't surprising to me because of, personalities and past experiences, but it was still upsetting that, um, and my brother made this observation that, we have very few opportunities in this life to show our absolute character. And those are the times when someone is the most vulnerable and the most in pain. Anything that someone does to ease that pain or to comfort them is it means more than any other time in a person's life, right? And yet,
absolutely.
if in that moment, that is your moment to inflict the most pain, the most insensitivity, that reveals a person's character amplified.
That's true. And just, there's something about grief. There's just a heightened sensitivity to both generosity and cruelty. So when, in those first few days after I returned from Mike's funeral and I went back to work, when, I was walking down the hallway at school, and my student, a rumor had gone through the school saying, "Oh, Ms. Welch, she's not coming back. She's not coming back." So when I went down that hallway and they saw me walking toward them, they just rushed me. I
Mm.
had 40, 50 boys just with their arms all around each other, all around me. And I was just in this big, giant mass. And from that point forward, there were students who would greet me at the beginning of each class with a hug
Mm.
and leave with a hug. And I realized in the society we live in these days, that's not always welcomed in all circles. But they did it just out of we had, they had Mike prior to me. So I'm not the only person who lost someone.
Right.
They lost a mentor and a father figure. And so we had this very unique teacher mentor bond. And so we were co-grieving, if you will. But likewise, when people say something rude or careless, that really hits hard as well. On the 1 year anniversary of his death, I had a coworker who said, "Oh," because he just said, "Is everything okay? You seem a little off today." And I said, it's the 1 year anniversary of Mike's death, and so just everything's hitting a little hard today." He's like, yeah, but it's 1 year, so it's over. You can move on from here. And I was stunned. I
I'm
I was
stunned.
I was absolutely like, it what? It's I don't even if that's what you believe, I don't know where you're from that you think that that's an okay thing to say
Right.
to someone who's grieving. But there are times where you feel like everybody else has a different timeline and you just aren't you're not on the timeline with them. And it I've learned though that grief doesn't have a your timeline is the timeline for grief, and it's not going to be the same as somebody else's, and that's fine. So I might be, who knows, I might be weeping 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It's fine. And I
Right.
might be fine for 4 years and then go back. It's fine.
Right. Yeah. You know, one thing in particular that you and I have talked about, we've talked about a lot, and I I actually I don't remember a lot of things from my time with grief. Uh, it seems like I don't know, just your brain is in such a fog so much. But I do remember when you and I talked early on, right after Mike passed, and and I remember you kind of asking if it was okay that you considered yourself a widow, or you know how, because there's no word for my boyfriend passed away, like
Yeah.
you're 16 or something. And even if that happened to somebody at 16, that'd be a tragic, horrible,
Yeah.
real experience, and we should never minimize anyone's relationship to someone who passes. But but i i i remember thinking, of course you can, use that word around me.
Yeah.
Maybe you and Mike didn't have the opportunity to go through with the marriage that you had planned, but you loved each other. And
Well, and we loved each other. He and I saw each other every morning at 7 a.m. at work. And most evenings, we were not, uh, you know, we would each go home to our respective homes, and then he would come over and he would be at my house until 9 p.m.
mhm,
So, really, the only time we didn't spend time was, at nighttime.
right,
And so, some on the weekends, he would stay until 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. So, uh,
like any engaged couple,
like
right?
any engaged couple. And we, not that I have to justify my relationship with him, but yeah, just there would, just saying, I noticed there's a difference. It's received different if I say my fiance died versus my husband died. Because my husband died lets people know that my entire life changed overnight. Everything was uprooted. My present, my future, every aspect of my life was touched by this. And again, that's not to say that if somebody loses the a boyfriend that they've been dating for 2 months in high school, that is also grief.
Yes.
That is also loss. And we can't weigh grief on scales. But I can say that uh, there was so much invested here.
Yeah.
And by invested, I mean just so much love, so many experiences. And in that first month, those first 2, 3 months, the only people who seemed to understand me were widows.
Yeah.
Even now, uh, it's a club. There is a widows club, and we understand. I don't know. We understand that there's not one set timeline for grief.
Mhm.
We understand that the number one thing you can do for somebody that is grieving that supersedes any words you could say is just your presence, to be there.
Right.
And that's not just for widows. I think that's just for people grieving in general. Um, the little preset canned sayings, the, oh, well, when God closes a door, somewhere he opens up a window. Or God never gives us more than we can handle. Those they get thrown out, and it just I want to you know me, I wanted to sock somebody in the face every single
Right.
time they said it. I don't I'm not a violent person, but I do have a very feisty spirit, and it just oh the and it's but here's the thing, you don't know until you go through it how useless and actually counteractive those expressions are. When
Right.
my adoptive father passed away, I remember one woman coming up to me, and her name's Eve Anderson, and she said, "Delilah, I'm not going to tell you it's ever going to be okay because it's not. There's a hole in your heart, and that hole is always going to be there. Always. You're just going to learn how to live with that hole."
Right.
And it's like, okay, that I can handle. It's because, yeah, there is always going to be this mic shaped hole in my heart now. And there's nothing that's going to fill it, nothing that's going to um, heal it. Might scab over a little bit, but you learn to live with it there. Having that hole doesn't mean that you can't move forward. In fact, it would feel it would feel wrong if it wasn't there.
Right. Right. Because of what it represents. I mean, it represents him, right? You know, the the amazing person, and the significant impact that he had on your life. Yeah. Why would you ever want to replace? You can't replace that. You can't replicate it.
You can't replace it, you can't replicate it, you can't I suppose you can try and patch it up, but I don't think that would stick.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But and not
Yeah.
only that, but it would be just these individuals that come into our lives that we love so deeply that they aren't just a part of our schedules. They become part of the fabric of who we are. It's embedded in us. So we can't just like you can't pull some threads out of a blanket and expect that blanket to remain whole. You can't pull this individual out of the fabric of your life and remain whole. You just have to leave that there. The generosity of Michael Gillitzer, the profound love he had for me, the time we spent together, that's all it's there.
How do you feel like you've changed as a person now that you've gone through? Because I know you were a compassionate person because you were extremely loving and compassionate to me when I was so fresh in my grief. But how are you different?
Oh, honestly, when I think back to when you lost Steve, I think to myself, wow, I really could have stepped it up a little bit as a friend. But as a society, we're not really good uh, with grief. We don't know how to handle grief. We're so far removed from it now. It used to be that when somebody passed away, they usually passed away at home, and so the funeral would be at home. Meemaw
Right.
would be right there laying in the bed that she had that she had passed away in. And then
Right.
from
Yeah. And
there,
people
we
would
would,
walk through the bedroom and pay their last respects, right?
but now, we have we have a funeral home where we have
Right.
the services, and just, we've really, um, we've padded ourselves from death so that when it hits us or when it hits somebody that we know, we really don't know how to respond, how to be there for them. I really do think that the Jewish tradition, that they were onto something with sitting Shiva, where you
Yeah.
sit there for a week long. You just sit there and you wallow it, and people come in and they sit with you. You you
Right.
just sit. I am grieving and I'm sitting, and that's it. And I think
Right.
there's something to be said for that.
There's a real sacredness to that, isn't there?
There is.
That's a
There
good
is.
that's a good point. I was thinking, I mean, there's nothing wrong with somebody being cremated, but even someone being cremated, it removes that step. You go from alive and vibrant to skipping that whole part of mortality,
Yeah.
right? It's really real when someone who has passed away does not look like someone who is alive. They do not look alive.
Yeah.
And they don't even totally look like themselves. It can be a really strange thing, but I wonder, yeah, maybe in our desire to avoid hard things, we even avoid that.
Yeah.
So all we have is the happy fun to, okay, now it's the box, and I
And
don't know whether or
and what do
not
we
that's
do right
good or
after the
wrong.
box? Right after the box, we have a party. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it's not like a birthday party, but still we get together, we eat. And I remember being so preoccupied with, just attending to people and attending to their needs that just funerals in general are, when you're the spouse or, one of the significant others, it's it's a horrid ordeal just because all you want to do is spend some time saying goodbye.
Yeah.
But instead, you have to, be the MC, the hostess with the mostest. It's hard. Um and not only that, but I really felt this. I don't know if this was a curse or a blessing, but so many of Mike's former students, who were also my former students, came to the wake and the funeral. And I, f- you know, they, even though some of these students are already 30 years old, I felt the need to comfort them and care for them. And
Mhm.
I was so glad to see them, though. These were the feathers in his cap, the wings,
Right.
the feathers in his wing. And so, but by the same token, it's difficult because there was plenty of me that just wanted to collapse and sob, but you've got to keep the brave face on.
Well, and maybe that brings up something that we can even explore and think about. I mean, when two people are hurting in the same vicinity, does one of them have to comfort the other, or can they sit Shiva together, right? Can they just, I mean, I think maybe part of it is just, you
Yeah.
being you, right?
Yep.
That you,
True.
I'm these people are here, they have needs. I am somebody who seeks after and tries to take care of needs. These are students, I need to comfort my students. But
Yep.
it would be interesting for there to not necessarily have to be somebody comforting somebody else. But I know when you're grieving, you feel that. You definitely feel that
Yeah.
that when there were people that I would remember thinking that I was having to comfort them in their grief, but maybe I didn't have to comfort them. Maybe we could have just both sat there and been sad together.
Same.
I don't
Yeah, I'm
know.
thinking the same thing. Well, and there's some people that I just, oh, like my own mom. I always feel like I can't show weakness in front of her because uh, she'll start crying too. And then and I see my mom crying, and I can't let my mama cry. And
Right,
so all of a sudden, my grief shuts down, and I just, oh, take care of
right,
mom.
right.
So yeah, how can we as a culture or as a society kind of take a step toward, you know what, let's all be in the mess of grief together,
Yeah.
um,
Well,
without
I was
having to there, you know.
I was impressed when you were talking about your students when you first came back. And these are future Marines, right? These are
Many of them are, yes. It's a military school for
right,
boys.
right.
Many of them do go into the armed forces, or we had, I think, about 9 of them go into service academies this year.
Mm.
And others will go into schools where they're part of the ROTC programs at their schools.
Well, and
Uh,
they accessed, I mean, they accessed something really compassionate and gentle inside of them. And and I think that's really beautiful, especially because they are at a military academy where you would maybe from the outside think that these were young men who didn't, who weren't able to access those kind of emotions and feelings, but they do.
they do, and if anything, I think because it is an all boys school, I think they are even more open to showing emotion. They don't have to put a brave face on because the girls are watching.
Right.
So and I really was, I have been surprised over and over again by things like that. When we're reenacting a scene from Hamlet, and I have, I will inevitably have students where I'm like, all right, kids, I need a Queen Gertrude here. And there's always one kid, I'll be Queen Gertrude. Alrighty then, here we go. And they've got, because it's a single gender scenario, they're okay
Right, right,
with having some fun with it.
right,
They don't have to be the manly man all the time.
right, right,
Uh,
right.
but and when you read my essay, you'll actually see a really good example of this. But
Mm.
because their mentors at this school are drill instructors, and the drill instructors are retired or active Marines.
Right.
And these men, it occurred to me when I saw them talking to the students after Mike passed away, it occurred to me these Marines know more about loss than I could possibly imagine. They inevitably, they all have lost a fellow Marine, either in active combat or due to the tremendously high suicide rate among our armed forces. So they know loss. They have lived in the middle of loss.
Right.
And so they are actually a tremendous resource. And they were extremely fatherly to the students at the time.
That's wonderful. Switching gears a little bit, tell
Okay.
me tell me about how your faith and your belief in God, how has that sustained you or even prepared you for the trial that you had?
Oh, I, when, in Mike's last minutes, they were trying to revive him. Uh, and as, they were trying to revive him, my mother and I were outside the hospital room praying and praying and praying and praying. And I would hear, because I could hear, the flat line. And then for a minute, for a few brief seconds, the flat line would stop. And I'd be like, he's back, he's back, he's back. I'm not really in the middle of this nightmare. And then it would start again. And it just, and we'd keep praying. And then my mom, she said, no, 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 this can't be happening. It's not happening. God's not going to let this happen. He wouldn't let this. I mean, reacting purely out of emotion, and she started getting a little angry at God. And I actually said, hey, pull it together. Pull it together. I'm losing, I'm losing Mike. Not you, which granted she was losing him because she had already accepted him as a son-in-law. But I kind of, kind of had to smack her around a little bit there.
Right.
But what's funny is I haven't had, I guess part of me expected to have some sort of moment where I was like, that's it. I'm out of this relationship with God thing. I don't believe in God anymore. Never. I haven't, not once. I haven't, there have been times where I have been frustrated, like, why? Why, God?
Right.
And I remember going to my priest. Actually, it was my mom who went to the priest. And she said, and you have to remember, my mom is a little 4'8" Mexican lady. So Father, I do not know what to do because sometimes I am so angry at God. I don't know what to say. And he just looked at her, deadpan, and he's like, that's all right. He can take it. and
Right.
And he really can.
Right.
If you read the Psalms or Job at all, God can take it.
Yeah.
God created us with these emotions.
Right.
God created us as we are. And so, it would be honestly, it would be somewhat unfair of God to expect us to go through some sort of loss like this and not have, negative emotions.
Right.
But so my relationship with God, there have been times where I've just yelled. More often than not, though, it hasn't been yelling in anger. It's been just weeping.
Right.
Uh, and the word why, just why? But honestly, I don't, let's say the heavens opened up in, the Simpsons fashion, the clouds opened up and a voice came down and a voice gave me a very rational explanation for why. It wouldn't, there's no why that would suffice for me.
That's right. It wouldn't take away the pain.
It wouldn't take away the pain. There might be a rationale that makes sense.
Right.
It wouldn't take away the pain.
Right.
So just sometimes I just ask why, just because I have no other way to express just this, the sense of loss and being lost sometimes.
Right.
By that same token, though, in the midst of all of that, I had some pretty dramatic things happen within 1 year. And it's funny because almost any grief program or grief support program will tell you, don't make any major changes within 1 year. Nothing major for 1 year. And I didn't have a choice. My son was going to graduate high school within 6 months of Mike's death, whether I liked it or not.
Right.
He was going to leave for college in September, whether I liked it or not. And then I discovered in March, whether I liked it or not, or no, rather April, I discovered I had cancer, whether I liked it or not. And
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that.
yeah, so and within 6 months of Mike passing, I had to have a full hysterectomy. Um, and people are just like, how are you handling the cancer thing? I'm like, next to losing Mike, it's really not that big of a deal. But so much, there were just so many changes that when shortly after uh, my hysterectomy, my parish priest came to me and he said, "Hey, Delilah, I know you have this master's in theology. We were wondering, would you be willing to teach some classes at church?" I was like, "Really? Yeah. You'll be teaching it with, Father so and so and Deacon so and so." I was like, Okay, yeah, okay, all right." And then, by the very nature of teaching these classes, I became more involved in the parish and people invited me to more things. And I wound up becoming one of these faces that people anticipate seeing at almost every parish event. And so it's like God provided a life for me after Mike.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not a life to replace Mike,
Right.
but a way to move forward.
Right. Right. It reminds me of the verse, I came to give life and to give it more abundantly.
Yeah.
Right.
And uh, I remember at one point I was sitting in front of the Eucharist and I was praying, and the thought occurred to me, wait, God, did you kill Mike so that I could spend more time with you? and uh and I say it now laughing, but when the thought hit me, I was like, ah, and it kind of threw me for a loop, just
Right.
having that thought. But then I realized, no, it's not so much that he knocked Mike off, but more, okay, Mike is gone. How did I respond? You know,
Yeah.
how did I respond when those life rafts were sent my way? I don't know if if you in your tradition, if you've ever heard that joke where there's a flood and
Oh, yes.
you know what I'm talking about, where there's a
Yes,
flood
yes.
and
Keep
somebody's just
going.
like, oh well, you know what, I don't need to worry about this because God will save me. Somebody comes, the water is 1 foot high, somebody comes by with a raft, says, hey, get on the raft. Nope, nope, my God will save me. And water keeps rising, person goes to the second floor of their house, somebody comes by with a boat. Hey, hop on in. Nope, nope, I'm good, God will save me. Finally they're at the roof, helicopter swings by, come on, let's go. Nope, my God will save me. Person drowns, gets up to heaven. I had faith in you, Lord, why didn't you save me? I tried. I sent you the raft, the boat, the helicopter. And so the question is, you know, are you gonna hop on that raft when it comes your way? I really do think that first invitation from my parish priest, that was the raft.
Yeah. I love that. I absolutely love that perspective. I feel like it leads perfectly into the final question that I ask everyone, which is, what do you think it means to grieve well?
Not just to grieve, but to grieve well. All right, I'm going to go back to Hamlet on this one. There's a part in Act 1 where the character Polonius in Hamlet is giving some advice to his son. And this phrase is used often, and I'm not always thrilled with the way it's used. But in this case, I will use it. to thine own self be true. And what I mean by that is when you grieve, don't lie to yourself. To grieve well means to allow yourself the timeline that you need. Don't, to grieve well means don't say, don't try to convince yourself it's okay when it's not okay. Because doing so will inevitably lead to a situation where you are not okay. Uh, Allow yourself to grieve. That's what allow yourself permission to feel rotten. Um, and allow yourself permission to not feel rotten.
Right.
I, th- about 5 months after Mike passed away, my students had a prom, and the theme was Gatsby. And the English department and we all got these flapper dresses, and we went, and scandal of scandals, I danced. I didn't dance so much because I was happy, but I danced because I needed a break from the everlasting gloom.
Yeah.
I needed a breath of fresh air. And so allow yourself to feel the feels.
Right. I love that. Being true to what you need in the moment when you need it, whatever that is.
Yeah.
I love that.
And on the other side of this, don't live by some other timeline, whether it's somebody else is trying to impose it on you or you just have this preconceived notion of what that timeline should be. Um, I've cried several times today. Some people would say it's been a year and a half. Why is she still, why are the tears so quick to surface? You know what? They are what they are. There are times where I'll be teaching in class and a tear might slip down my cheek because somebody's, read a line of poetry that I've read 5,000 times before, but never thought of it in the light of the loss that I had. Okay. If a kid, I actually have had a student say, "Ma'am, are you okay?" I'm okay. I'm just feeling the
Feeling it.
feels. Okay. You know what? What I became, maybe in some people's eyes, I became an emotional woman. But I think more likely than not, they've seen somebody who knows how to have an emotion without it completely rocking their universe.
Right. Yeah, those tears are formed in the clouds over that hole in the heart,
Yeah.
right? And we don't want that hole to go away. We want to honor the person that resided there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the
Thank
time to
you.
talk to me.
Oh, thank you for taking the time to talk to me all those times. Just, oh, and what's funny is in those first conversations after Mike passed, I can't remember the specific words you said to me. All I can remember is that you were there. So, if anything, if there's any advice to be given to anybody here who knows someone who's grieving, just the fact that somebody is there,
Yeah. Yeah.
not rushing them necessarily to say anything, just be there. Yeah.
I agree. Your life is so interrupted and it's interrupted forever, right? To have someone interrupt their routine to come and be with you is it's a really beautiful thing.
Mhm.
I'm glad we've been there for each other. I
Same.
appreciate your friendship so much.
Oh, Gonzaga!
Go Zags!
Go Zags!
Thank you.
But, well, you know what, though? If you think, since Gonzaga's a Jesuit school. If
Mm-hmm.
you consider the Jesuit motto, the ad majorem Dei gloriam, to the greater glory of God, hey, you know what? That's what this podcast is for, to the greater glory of God,
That's right.
for all God's grieving people.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's absolutely right. Mm. Thank you.
Thank you.